really in my blood. So while we do this, making a puppet company, puppet theater, it was me and my husband actually now. We are working together as co-artistic directors, and he's also a visual artist. And then we found that puppetry is actually the medium between performing and visual arts. And then we found that, so how we learn, how we will do this. And we don't want this to be happen only for children. Definitely we don't have that kind of combination in our country. So we need to go out to find friends that doing the same thing with us. So that's how we started to think about moving out from the countries and do things. And also the other hand, it was because we found it's also hard to travel within Indonesian islands. Well, we have 17,000 islands, but no grants for traveling for artists. So we found that we are not only the citizen of Indonesia, we are the citizen of the world. This language needs to be, spread not just only among Indonesians, but also with people outside us. So, and because our puppet performances is not with language, it's non-verbal performance. So we thought that's also why we do this, because we want to spread the message further out. So yeah, it's always good to go out and then meet the people who do the same thing with you, which is it's not always from the puppetry scene, but people with problems, and then how they solve it. So I think that's what actually our reason.
And again, there was a love story there with you and your husband.
Yes.
But the other thing that's interesting, building from some of the stuff that came up with Yongi and Nathan yesterday, this idea of friendship, which seems to be some language that we don't really use in funding terms, but it's actually the human qualities that come out of that element of the practice, and isn't something necessarily, you often see funders talk about. So I'd really like to maybe unpack that a little bit more. But Sally, what are your sort of thoughts about your international practice?
I think that's a really interesting point. It's an interesting question, and when talking about funders supporting work travelling internationally, kind of bringing it back to from New Zealand, what does that actually mean, and why do we want to travel internationally, and what are the messages we want to get out there, and how do we do that? I think from the Conchas perspective, I've been working with the Conchas, their producer, for 6 months. Previous to that, I was the Auckland Fringe director, and I worked for the major contemporary arts centre in New Zealand. So I sort of have a perspective on both sides as a producer and presenter, and as now an independent producer for the Conch. But from the Conch's perspective, Nina trained, and again it came back to sort of a love story really. Nina trained and lived between her mother's home of England and New Zealand, and her father